Discovering that this is all an illusion has nothing to do with artificially becoming falsely passive and avoiding activity in the world. In fact, it has to do with quite the opposite. When you wake up and discover that this is all false, that time, space, and thought are just projections of consciousness, it enables you to actually step up and tell the truth completely, because then you see it doesn't matter what happens to the body. The body was born to die. The body was meant to go. The body was never meant to be eternal. It's a temporal spatial vehicle that is meant to engage in certain activities so long as it's here. Therefore, there's no fear of suffering, no fear of death. And when there's no fear of suffering and death, it's not about simply staying here withdrawn in the self. It's about being able to engage in activity in the world fearlessly, and therefore not pushed by anybody or anything, not pressured by anybody or anything, not contrived by anybody or anything. Not the left, not the right, not the imaginary center, or some imaginary state of independence which doesn't exist. We're not talking about contriving any notion of what is or what isn't or what should be or what should not be. We're talking about being directly aware of the eternal reality of consciousness, and therefore within that being aware of the physics of the mind. And when you're aware of the physics of the mind, you see through all the illusion. And what you see through is the illusion of a separate sense of self, the I, the me, which is the product of distortion psychologically. And when you're no longer bound by that, you can step up, you can roar, you can act, you can tell the truth. And all that action will come from love. And you won't be pushed one way or the other. And therefore you stop seeking to join institutions or organizations. You yourself become an institution. And not that others might become priests or pilgrims or whatever, though they might temporarily. But what you want for everybody is to step up and roar and tell the truth. And the truth is that all is God. All is one with God. It is impossible to be separate from God. Separation from God is a lie. That's the eternal battle cry. Separation from God is impossible. All beings are irrevocably one with God and are perfect and pure manifestations of God. And the only way to tap into that is to accept yourself completely as you are, behind, underneath, and around all social conditioning. And it's only social conditioning that divides you into masculine and feminine, into black and white, into this and that, into self and other. That's all conditioning. When you drop all conditioning, you see that you are all being, complete and whole. And here in this state, there's no division, and there's no need to cheaply identify with any function of society, with any function of the body, with any function of the mind, with any function at all. There's no need to identify with anything because you are all being. And in this awareness, you can sit here perfectly serenely, doing absolutely nothing in the body and the mind, and the body-mind can step up and be used as a perfect, pure instrument of this love without any fear. It's okay if the body dies. It will die. It's okay if the body hurts. It will get hurt. There's nothing wrong with that. And so you stop living in fear of punishment and reward from anybody, from the so-called enemy, as well as from your own so-called people. Because it's the same mind that divides into us and them. And inwardly there's punishment and reward, and outwardly there's punishment and reward. The in-group with its system of hierarchy and punishment and domination, inwardly and against the other, and the out-group with its own system of hierarchy, punishment and reward, against this group and against its own in-group. And so you see that all in-groups and out-groups are constantly destroying themselves as they're constantly trying to destroy the other. Because it's the same pattern of mind. It's the same physics of mind. So the only thing there is to do ever is to understand the physics of mind. Period. Period. End of story, literally. It's the end of all story. The end of all personal identification. And any person, any persona, is simply a tool for communication. There is no true person. There is no true persona. There is no true personality. The only true personality is what is called in the The Hindu culture, the eternal or the supreme personality of Godhead, which is referred to as Krishna, which is all that is. Shiva is that which is not, and the two are one and the same. And altogether, you can call that the goddess, she, her, Shakti. It's all one, it's all the same thing. But I say the supreme personality of Godhead because when the pure formlessness manifests in pure form, because formlessness is eternal and always what it is, and because form is always a thing of division, when the perfect emanation of God manifests in form, it has certain immutable characteristics which encompass the entire gamut of human personality in its most purified form, because it is totally always purely self-aware. And therefore there's always a certain playfulness there. And that's why Krishna is called the pure emanation of Leela, or Ras Leela, which means the juicy play of life. And so life itself is that juice, and there's always that element of mischievousness in it. So Krishna always has a smirk on his face, no matter what, even in the midst of the battlefield. There are only a few times when he drops the smirk, and even then, the body, his being, doesn't drop the playfulness. It's for the sake of a show that has to be put on in the matter of diplomacy, you see. But Krishna always has that smirk on his face, because he's always aware of what's going on behind the appearance of time, space, and thought. So that's the whole purpose of these images, not so that you believe or disbelieve in them, but because they are images of you. They show you who and what you are. You are all the gods. You're also all the demons and the devils. Every heaven, every hell, every earth, every parallel dimension exists inside of you, is inside of you, is you. You are the source, in fact, of all the images, of all the mythologies, of all the concepts. And you have the unique ability as a human being to know that, as well as to still be able to play with time, space, and thought. To be human is to be God. And you really have to know that. And if you then take that and start making some strange philosophy about co-creation, you're just fucking with yourself. There's no such thing as co-creation because there is no co-creator. There is no two here. There's only one. There's no manifestor, there's no manifestation. All manifestation is a bullshit philosophical lie. It's there to sell you products to keep your ego on the hook. Don't buy it. Co-creation is a lie. All the so-called laws that people try to distill and then sell you as being eternal spiritual laws are lies. The eternal laws of the universe can only be known as one all at once, and you cannot put it into words. You can only know it directly. And when you know it directly, you can try to put it into words, but it will only be understood by those who are already here. And those who are not already here cannot and will not understand, but they will think they've understood. The ego will take it and try to turn it into a teaching that it can then take and use to get more power, more control, more prestige, more fame, more ability to dominate and conquer. Even if it thinks it's doing it in the name of justice and truth and righteousness, it's not. And so the real thing is only ever revealed to those who are pure in heart, to those who have no guile, to those who are willing to die rather than to kill. Actually, deeply. Not out of false cowardice, but out of the deep realization that there's nothing to be gained by doing anything to anybody. There's nothing to be gained by conquering. There's nothing to be gained by dominating anybody else. Nothing to be gained by it. Nothing. And if you're actually intelligent, you see that, and then you stop. And you realize that you as a human being, as well as all human beings, are completely and totally up against a wall. You have nowhere to move. In fact, you were born that way. You were born into a world in which you were already up against a wall. And the minute you see that you have nowhere to move, and nobody does, and anybody who thinks they do is playing with their own minds, recycling images, the minute you see that, you stop. Because you have no choice but to stop. You enter into choiceless self-awareness. And when you enter into that choiceless self-awareness, it's because you have the experience of having to make the choice between entering into choiceless self-awareness or else keeping up the pretense that you have some kind of choice that you don't really have. So you just stop pretending. You take off the mask. And when you take off the mask, there is God. But first you have to experience that as the devil. So you have to walk through hell. And you have to come out the other side. You have to walk right through the devil's maw. That's why in Dante's Inferno, the final boss, as he goes through hell, is obviously the devil, right? Who is it, Judas in one mouth, and then some pope in the other, and then uh, whatever the fuck, the central head, which either had something or didn't have something. I don't remember, it doesn't matter. Because it's all your own self. It's the ego. And the ego will do all of its tricks in the end to get you to stay in its clutches. But if you see that the ego is just recycling, regurgitating whatever imagery has been conditioned into it by the culture, and operating under its physics, like an animatron. The ego is an animatron, dressed up in all kinds of spooky clothing, from your religion, from your society, from your family, from your culture, whatever. And when you see it doesn't have any power actually to do anything to your true self, your eternal true self is untouchable. It's untouched by suffering, by separation. It's untouched by anything. It's purely innocent for all of eternity. And when you discover the eternal innocence of your own being, you're not afraid of anything. Nothing can touch you. Anything can happen to the body. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what happens to the body. And so there's certainly no fear of ridiculous curses and hexes and so-called black magic or dark magic or whatever. Nonsense occult identified people who think that they can sway the tide of time and space by engaging in ridiculous ritual that they don't even understand the circuitry thereof. And they do these things. People do these things for power. And that's what manifestation and the law of attraction is, a cheap attempt at trying to mass package that kind of futile ego activity, pretending it has some kind of spiritual merit or value. It doesn't. Because when you're completely here, absorbed in God, there's no desire, there's no want for anything. And in that, you see that whatever is actually needed is the same thing as what is actually truly wanted, and that always comes right on time. And so you thinking you want and need all these things that you don't really want and need is just the ego. And the law of attraction and manifestation is just the ego trying to play God, which is stupid. It's just a continuation of the same old fear, pretending not to be fear. And so when people talk about having premonitions, or, people experience, say, well, sometimes I want something and then it comes. Yeah, where does the desire come from? It comes from God. And so you will sometimes have the experience of wanting something and then it arrives. But if you're in your ego, you'll think it arrives because you want it. No. It was already coming, and that's why you were given the desire for it. So don't be ignorant about time and space. But the whole premise behind these laws of attractions and manifestations and so on is an ignorance of time and space. The beginning, the middle, and the end of all time is all here right now. And if you're linearly identified with some chunk of it, then you will experience the movement of, I want something, and then I either get it or I don't. And if you don't get it, you're frustrated. And if you do get it, you now think that you're some all-powerful genie. And then you may persist in that illusion for a while, and then one day you won't get what you want. And then you'll blow a fucking gasket. I've seen this happen all the time. Sometimes people call it a test to see your integrity. That's one way of putting it. But it's to see if you're actually ignorant or not, to put it like that. And so sometimes you will have the experience of you wish for this, you get it. You wish for this, you get it. And then you'll go getting a big dick about it, and you'll think, oh, well, God favors me. I'm special. I snap my fingers and I get what I want. And everybody, without exception, that goes through that experience eventually, however quickly, comes into the moment, and it's actually always going on, but people like that ignore everything else, because you're not getting everything you want by that measure of desire, but you tell yourself you are. There are all kinds of little things that don't go your way all the time. And you know you have no control over it. But you ignore those things, and so whatever you're manifesting, so-called, you say, I manifested it, but whatever it doesn't go your way or doesn't go right, you either ignore it, or you say it's the devil, or it's the enemy working against me, or it's the devil working in the world, or whatever your excuse is. And so the reality is you never always get what you think the ego wants, even if you simply pay attention to you getting what you want, which is just you building up a narcissistic personality bubble, and eventually that bubble will come crashing down, it'll pop, and you will have a psychotic break. And the amount of people I've known who have been so-called spiritual teachers who will literally be teaching so-called manifestation courses or manifestation master courses, who then start complaining and crying about how they're not getting what they want and their manifestation isn't working and people are working against them and all the stupid fucking bullshit because they were disingenuous with themselves and others from the beginning. So if you're walking this path of spirituality, of awakening, of enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, I almost can't stand those words, but we have to use some words, and you're here because you think it's going to get you power and control over life, over other people, you're fucking ridiculous. You have no idea who you are, where you are, what you're doing. So this whole thing is about returning to the truth, coming back to the truth of who and what you really are. That means you take off the mask. And the mask is fundamentally unreal. It's a contrivance put together by thought, which is continued by the whole movement that we call society, or civilization, or culture, or religion, or whatever. And so the minute you see it's all ridiculous, you let it go. Who cares? You let it go completely. It means nothing. And at this point, the ego will go, no, it does mean something. It's my culture. It's important. It's my religion. It's important. It's my family. And these are our values and blah, blah, blah. That's all your bullshit. You're either here and you're awake and clear, or you're not. And if you're not, it's because you choose not to, because you'd rather be afraid. Clinging to any identification with family and values and mine and yours, that's all ego. That's all fear. You are either aware directly of the eternal laws of consciousness and God, or you're not. And if you're not, it doesn't matter what you identify with at all. And only from this place can you take any real action in the world, or in yourself, which is the same thing. And all you can do is tell the truth and be the truth. And being the truth is the same thing as telling the truth. Then you tell the truth in silence, and then the voice is a seamless continuation of the silence. And then there's nothing to remember, nothing to forget, nothing to do or not do. Whatever must arise, arises. Whatever mustn't, doesn't. And that's what happens anyway. Even when the ego has its illusion of being in control, it's not. So then if you surrender to this, you see, here's my task and here's my job. And what is that? It's what I'm doing right now. This is my job. My job is to be here with you like this. This is my job. It's my only job. Everything else is just a support for that. But this is my job. This is my work. To be here with you like this, so that you can wake up and be free, to know your eternal true self. That's the work. And I'll come on however the fuck I have to come on, and I'll say whatever I have to say and do whatever I have to do. It is what it is, because it all happens naturally. And so whatever work appears to be going on by the body, whatever the body appears to be doing in time-space, is simply known to be a continuous oneness with all that is. And so even though somebody from the outside may look and say, well, it looks like you're doing some activity, that's your perception based on your need to categorize. If you catch me at the temple or on the dance floor or at the dojo or wherever it is, you can say, well, there's you dancing, there's you templing, there's you doing Aikido, there's you driving, there's you doing whatever the fuck, right? You doing whatever work you're doing. But if you're actually here in the midst of it, you can say, as the one doing it, then the one doing it will tell you that they're not doing it. They're not doing anything. Nothing is happening. There is only God. There's the appearance of doing only when you start cutting things up. Otherwise, you're just here. You don't enter into a self-defeating, self-reflexive mode of mind, which then just kinks you up and chokes you up. And in that continuous flow, there's no division. There's no need to stop and break anything up into pieces, mentally, emotionally. It's not necessary. And so you just meet whatever it is the way it is, with fullness, with the totality of your being. And then even if something which you would call darkness appears, it's immediately illumined. And then that darkness can either surrender to that light, or it can double down and either try to attack, or it can run away, but it can't do anything else. And even if it attacks or runs away, it's already done. All ignorance is already done. It's already over. It's already defeated. The eternal light of consciousness is all there is. The darkness is its play. But the darkness forgets that it's the play of the eternal light. And then to counteract that darkness is a sort of false light that is meant to go to war with that false darkness. Because the true darkness of time and space is the exact same thing as the eternal light. And it has nothing to do with cruelty, violence, ego, evil, whatever. That's the false darkness. The counterpoint of which is the false light, you see? And so the fighting of the false light and the false darkness is a play within the true radiant darkness of being, which is called God. Or in the yogic culture, it's called Shiva, or Krishna, or whatever you want to call it. You can call it God, you can call it Allah, you can call it Christ. I mean, you can call it whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's consciousness itself, indivisible, omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. And if you come into the awareness of omnipresence directly, you see that omnipresence is all there is. And so there's nothing to fear. And so you can get up and you can fight. It doesn't matter. There's no animosity behind the movement. There's no anger behind the movement. It doesn't matter. No anger. You don't have to have anger. That doesn't mean that you can't burn everything down, metaphorically. I'm talking about bringing an end to all images, all concepts. All notions of self and other are unfucking necessary. Language goes on functioning. Language does its job. And language is a keeper of history. And so history will always be kept by language. That's the truth. And you just let language keep history. Even the greatest historian goes to sleep at night, and all of their knowledge of history is gone. No matter how much knowledge you accumulate, you go to sleep at night and it's gone. And so at some point you have to stop worrying about losing information and losing knowledge, because the true self is here beyond knowledge, and to know that is true knowledge. And in fact, that is the only true knowledge, the knowledge of God. The knowledge of eternal consciousness is the only true knowledge. Every other kind of knowledge, including historical knowledge, is distortion. It's vain knowledge. It only has certain practical purposes for survival in day-to-day life. But there's no point in sitting around remembering the tragedy if everybody's conscious. You only sit around trying to memorialize tragedy in an unconscious, ignorant world. And so there's no virtue in memorializing tragedy, except that you're trying to remind people of where they are if they're ignorant of where they are. But if you're very clear on where you are, you don't have to crystallize suffering, because suffering is just it's a fact of time and space, and suffering tells its own story. And if you suffer completely for even a moment, you know the whole history of the suffering of all beings in the universe, past, present, and future, because suffering is suffering. It's not personal. It's the movement of thought. And so all history is known completely right here, because the history of all beings is the same history. And so you don't have to go living this guilt-ridden life, making your insides a constant, memorial walkway of every tragedy ever experienced by humankind. It's ridiculous. It's a waste of energy and time and space and thought and feeling. It's a waste of everything. You only have to suffer completely once, and when you do it, you're done, unless you don't want to be done. And of course, the movement of the mind says, don't be done. It says, don't be done. Why? Because the mind is like crabs in a barrel. It's mechanical. The mind can only ever try to keep itself stuck, because the minute that there is that illumination of the mind, then the mind is no longer the mind. And the mind is mechanically trying to maintain its mindness. That's what it does. The mind is only ever trying to mechanically maintain its mindness. And so the minute you see that, then it's over for the mind. The mind has no power, and you see it never actually did have any power. It only had the illusion of power. And so that's what waking up means. And you may hear the sound of Om, or you may hear angels singing, or you may get some great visitation of a being of light. I mean, you may experience all of that, and there's nothing wrong with any of that. It's fine. But really and truly, it's very simple, and it's often underwhelming for the ego because the ego expects some great thing. But what happens when you wake up is that all the expectations of the ego are totally subverted. And that's how it has to be, because that's the only way to bring an end to that false structure called the ego. And then, once you're here in eternal consciousness, you can use the mind without identifying with it, and therefore the self that you believed yourself to be before that doesn't exist anymore. And you can try to reaccess that self from memory, but it just doesn't work, because it's never the same. And you see that even as you were going through life believing that self to be the same, it in fact never was the same. You just had the illusion of there being a consistent personality structure present, and there never was. And that's what we call the ego. And that's why we say that the ego doesn't exist. Because the notion of ego is a crystallized, consistent, constant personality structure that is ever the same. And it's not. Such a thing doesn't exist. And when you finally concede to the fact it doesn't exist, you see that the whole social game of pretending to be a stable personality is fucking stupid. But that's how you're raised from the time you're a child, is you're supposed to have the same likes and the same dislikes and the same reactions and the same responses so that everybody around you finds you predictable. But that's not the truth of being. And you see that that's asked for, it's required by the entire structure of society. It's required by the legal system, by the social system, by the political system, by the education system, by the scientific system, by the religious system, by the philosophical and psychological systems. It's required by every single institution that you pretend to be something you're not, that you pretend to be some compartmentalized, rigid, static, crystallized structure of mind-body, of personality. And it's just, that's not how anything works. That's not truth. And then you see exactly the kind of world that we've created for ourselves to live in, which is totally anti-human in every single way. And it inevitably must come to an end in its own ignorance. Ignorance always comes to its own end in its own ignorance. And love, truth, peace, and freedom never comes to an end. Even in the midst of all ignorance, it's still here. Even in the midst of all conflict, peace, joy, truth, love are still right here. So that's why you don't have to do anything but be yourself, but be this. That's why all those old sayings come from the past, from the great masters saying, know yourself and be true to yourself. Because yourself, in this true way, is all there is. But you have to know yourself before you can be true to yourself. And to know yourself is to accept yourself completely as you are, despite whatever is going on in the world. And then no matter what happens, it doesn't matter. Because your innocence can't be touched. Love can't be touched. Whatever happens. And then it doesn't matter what happens, because you could do anything or nothing. So this path is not about cultivating anything. There's nothing to cultivate. You're already whole and free. You can't cultivate love. You can't cultivate peace. You can't cultivate truth. You can't cultivate enlightenment. There is nothing to fucking cultivate. You are already the culmination of everything, and you are the source of everything. Brilliantly. Very good. Okay. See you later.